In Who Moved My Cheese by Dr. Spencer Johnson, he uses a simple allegory involving four characters, Sniff, Scurry, Ham, and Haw. And they navigate a maze in search of cheese, a metaphor for what we want in life, such as a job, relationship, or health. And the story centers on how each character reacts when the cheese is moved, reflecting the need to adapt to change. And we just watched dentists and leadership in the state of Idaho adapt and make that change. We begin our podcast right there.
Welcome, all of you fantastic dental podcast listeners, to the My Practice, My Business Dental Podcast Show, where we help dentists profit and thrive with excerpts from the clinical business of dentistry training here at My Practice, My Business. We'll be addressing and answering questions with current trends dentists and their teams face each and every day in their pursuit of this wonderful career we call dentistry. And now the host of our show, the clinical director and president at My Practice, My Business, Dr. Rob Thorup.
I'm joined today by my sweetheart, Tracy Thorup. Say hi, hun.
Hello to everyone.
Boy, I'll tell you, Tracy was hugely instrumental in the state of Utah in passing laws this year, getting them pre-written, giving them to the legislator, and getting them passed. And we just have had a wild week. We're reporting back. We haven't done a podcast for a while, and we wanted to put one out there to tell you what's going on in the state of Idaho. But before we do that, I just want everyone to know that I look at the social media groups that are out there, and I listen to different podcasts, but I read the comments that are on social media platforms, and a lot of people are like yelling at Delta Dental. I mean, it seems to be Delta Dental is the nemesis in dentistry, and it's interesting because it's like, who moved my cheese in the dental industry? And I think everybody would pretty much agree that Delta Dental is the main culprit moving the cheese. Am I wrong on that, hun?
No. And what's been really interesting is watching a shift of people not only talking about Delta Dental, but it seems like they're educating the viewers, whether they're patients or other dentists or people in hygiene, just to kind of explain the situation and what's going on. And we're on the cusp, I think, of some pretty big change where offices are going to start making some decisions.
Well, this narrative on Who Moved My Cheese, when all of a sudden I just woke up one morning, I'm like, oh my gosh, Delta Dental is moving the cheese.
They're taking the cheese.
Yeah, exactly. This narrative, it's so eerily applicable to the current state of dental insurance, particularly how companies like Delta Dental operate. And dentists and patients alike are characters in this real life maze. And I mean, it's like, this application, this metaphor is so directly related because they're constantly trying to locate. We as dentists and our patients too now, we're constantly trying to locate the cheese of quality oral health care. But the challenge is that insurers aren't just moving the cheese, like you said, hun. They're changing the maze.
Oh, true.
The rules are always shifting, and what procedures are covered, reimbursement rates, required pre-authorizations, and even what counts as necessary care. And that's what I think we've seen a lot of. And so for providers committed to delivering the best care, most advanced care, this inconsistency is not just frustrating, it's professionally and ethically compromising with what they're doing. And I want to get into, Tracy and I, we went up north on Monday, met with a legislator in the state of Idaho to show that Delta Dental is completely ignoring their state non-covered service law. But they don't have a commissioner that they can report to, add to that.
You're right. And for those of you who are in Idaho listening in on this, it's really just some good insight that we've gained over this week alone. So just so that you're aware, the non-covered law is divided up into two sections. The first one says if the code is deemed not covered by the insurance company, by the plan, then they can't regulate it. Now, they go in to define a covered service. And so a covered service is pretty much anything that they would have paid for. When it comes to services and your team members calling up saying, is this code covered? If the insurance company says no, then there you go. It's a non-covered code and you can bill accordingly, even if they turn around and say, oh, we think that should be included. And that's where they're trying to be tricky with their verbiage. It doesn't matter if they think it should be included. It is a non-covered code.
If it's non-covered.
Exactly. Now,
they can't tell you to write it off. They can't do it. Now, the second part of it is an additional section of the law that states that if there are covered codes that the insurance company maybe would reimburse, or they might have certain limitations, you are allowed to bill your full fee-for-service fee after the patient receives 100% more than their maximum. So, for example, if they have a yearly max of $1,000, once that plan or that patient receives double, so it's going to be $2,000 in this case, everything done after that maximum has been doubled is deemed not covered until the plan refreshes. And so there are two sections of the law. And unfortunately, Delta Dental of Idaho had a consulting dentist that was a little confused on the two. Hopefully after that meeting that we had on Friday, he'll understand that a little bit better. Now, in addition, we found out that on Friday, there is an avenue. Now, Idaho does not have a department to handle provider complaints. But as of right now, you can submit a complaint if you're at a provider's office and file it under a consumer complaint. It will go to the appropriate person. And if you want more information, obviously reach out to us. But that was some good information, good intel. Yeah, and what's really sad is 99% of the dentists and their teams up there don't know that.
Nope.
I have to say, Trace, that one of my mentors that was up there in Idaho that I had a conversation with, he's been involved in legislation for years, and I told him that it's really sad that Delta Dental of Idaho is not adhering to their non-covered service law. And of course, I gave him examples. He was very aware. He's been practicing dentistry forever. He's ready to retire. And he said, what do you mean they're not allowing you to charge for X, Y, and Z? He goes, they can't tell you not to. Those are non-covered services. And and he hasn't been in practice for a while, but he's like fully retiring from all dentistry period here in the next month or two. But he hasn't been practicing for a while, and he had no idea. And he's been a delegate with the ADA. He's been heavily involved with ISDA leadership for years. See,
and that's what I'm afraid of, though, because the more the associations hire people with no hands-on experience in dentistry or with dealing with these insurance companies, the more disengaged, I want to say, they would be because they don't have that experience. And so I do get concerned a little bit when these leaders aren't on the front lines fighting with the insurance companies.
That's a really good point. So anyone who's read the book, Who Moved My Cheese, knows that the emotional resonance of having your stability pulled out from underneath you, they know what that feels like. And in the dental world, that cheese represents more than just income. It stands for autonomy, like clinical integrity, the ability to use the best tools for the deliverer of oral health care that we possibly can as dentists. And that's how I view it. Imagine investing in state-of-the-art dental technology, adopting evidence-based protocols, and hiring well-trained staff, only to be told by Delta Dental that reimbursement will be lowered or worse, denied because the procedure is deemed optional or non-covered. That's more than moving the cheese. That's replacing it with a plastic replica. And this is especially true in the states of Washington, Idaho, Oklahoma, Hawaii, and now Wyoming, we hear, where Delta Dental has implemented policy changes that we never signed on to that not only restrict coverage, but actively undercut the use of higher quality materials and techniques. And these changes, they impact the patients, providers, and denying patients access to the best care while undermining the professional standards dentists strive to uphold. And that became evident and clear at the meeting that we were at the Idaho State Dental Association.
That's something that really did resonate with me. I was sitting back there, and again, we were just there listening. As clients, non-clients, it didn't matter. The entire group of dentists in there were all voicing the same concerns. And I thought that it would be a little bit more varied with some of the concerns they had. It was all on lower reimbursement.
All on insurance reform.
Exactly. And
it wasn't on fluoride.
Oh,
it wasn't on the Hygienist Act.
It definitely wasn't.
It was on the things that are in the top 5 concerns that dentists have nationwide.
And they brought up the same point. I mean, if Delta, you are keeping your reimbursement at the least expensive professionally accepted treatment and sometimes even lowering it, that puts me in a position to not be able to offer these better enhancements that are better for the patient. And honestly, docs, from a business perspective, if you're getting paid for Walmart, you can't offer Nordstrom's and not charge for that. It's a bad business decision.
So this is a meeting that, well, when we went up to the Idaho State Dental Association to just sit in on a meeting, I was blown away at Delta. It looked like Delta Dental put on the entire ISDA meeting. I wonder if they funded it. Of course, we know they can afford it.
Well, they probably did, and they were talking about
the crap out of it.
Well, they were talking about their sliver of margins, but they said those profit margins were after overhead was met. And I'm thinking, well, this is obviously a part of the overhead is paying for this convention, and
millions of dollars.
Now we're hearing a little bit more with possible sponsorship of ADOM as well. I think that if the dentist were to sit back,
Delta Dental wants to sponsor ADOM.
They want to take over and
contribute.
ADOM. Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Let's teach all the office managers more lies, misinformation on what's covered, what's not. I really loved it how the one doctor that oversees all the claims, right? How when everybody brought up like Delta Dental of 16 states allowing choice and have, the patient has to be informed and consent signed, and Delta Dental of 16 states allow that. And they were like, what? Well, we would have to see proof. And one of the doctors actually took a copy of the Delta Dental of 16 states.
And he had it right in his hands. That was awesome.
And he looked at it, read it, rolled it up in his hand. For all we know, he probably threw it away. Trace, I know I wasn't going to say this. I'm just going to say it. I did not feel good in that room. I felt good with all the dentists there expressing their concerns about the control of deliverable quality oral health care to their patients being compromised by Delta Dental, because the dentist stood up and said, I cannot provide a high-end implant when you reimburse me at X amount of dollars.
Yep.
I can't do it. I have to be able to charge the patient. If I want to put a Straumann or Nobel implant in, I've got to charge the patient an additional fee for that better material, which Delta of 16 states allows, and more states, which Delta of 16 states allow. Why don't you? And they're like, they were like dumbfounded. It just, honestly, it felt like, they guarded the almighty dollar like I've never seen anybody guard it. And what's interesting is we live in a competitive market. Remember this? They stated, we live in a competitive market, and if we raise our premiums, then people are not going to choose oral healthcare. They're going to go to another company.
Here's what was interesting, though. In the same breath, they said that because they have such a great plan, patients are willing to pay a little bit more for them.
And their plan's not better than the other plans.
Well, you know what I think it is? I think it's because of the low reimbursement and the fact that they're using bundling to not only, now you've got the doctors that are reimbursed very low, but they can't charge for half of the things that they do because of the bundling system that they have set in place. And so it looks really good to the patient to see low copays and the things that Delta doesn't cover, or, tries to say they cover, only they don't. They use that bundling technique to make themselves look really good and not put that charge to the patient for those non-covered services. And so it's just a lot of manipulation, unfortunately. And you're right. I didn't leave really feeling like much was going to happen. I loved the fact that these doctors were all very unified with their response and their concerns.
All of them did such a great job up there.
But I'm extremely skeptical that Delta is actually going to do something about this. It's going to be all just saying, oh yeah, well, we care about you and we'll think about it. And if it weren't for you,
if it weren't for you,
we wouldn't exist. That's what they said. If it weren't for you, doctors, we wouldn't exist. Well, you know what, docs? This is where maybe you do have more power than you think you have then.
Yeah. Because they said the company is actually, you're the shareholders of the company. Didn't they mention something like that?
They said something like that.
It was really weird.
Was like, whatever.
Yeah. Well, the CEO said they will have a policy change within 4 weeks and get to him within 4 weeks. So I hope the dentists of Idaho, the Idaho State Dental Association, the new executive, we did not meet her. And we hope that she has the vim and vigor of the interim guy that was there. And I understand she's pretty wise, and hopefully she'll understand why dentists are dropping their association memberships left and right, because the associations are not representing them when it comes to this kind of stuff. So let's see what happens. They have a tiger by the tail right now, and if Delta chooses not to do anything, then the next thing that ought to happen is, okay, we're going to let every Delta dental patient know that I can only put in cheap crap, and the dentist has to adhere to putting the least expensive professionally accepted treatment in those patients' mouth, even if it's carrying 2 products.
Yep.
All the time. They've got to give the patients what the PPO plan is paying them for, and stop their altruistic crap of, well, it's like, I ethically can't do that. Well, guess what, Doc? You ethically cannot cost shift from your fee-for-service patients or PPO patients where choice is allowed, and you're getting your fees closer to your fee-for-service fees. Those patients, it's completely unethical to have those patients paying for Delta Dental's patients to have high-quality material when they have stated that they are paying you for the least expensive material.
Well, and you're opening up a whole deal where you could be accused of discrimination against all those other patients. You're giving something away for free for Delta Dental patients, but yet you're charging everybody else, including your fee-for-service patients. And so this is where ethics play a role. But what's really funny is you said 4 weeks. So the CEO mentioned that they were going to have something back within 4 weeks responding to these questions. And I heard a doctor in the crowd say, okay, somebody set their calendar for July 13th. So that's going to be the big day. But on another note with associations, what was really neat is these doctors, some of them were not association members, and they were showing up to be here for this meeting. And because the association arranged for this, because the association gave them a voice. We had a couple of doctors that mentioned they signed up to be members of the association. And that's the thing. If you have somebody who you think should be representing you, represent them, give them a voice.
Well, yeah, no, I totally agree. Here's the thing, too. I don't think we announced at the very beginning the concerns with the Idaho State Dental Association and their dentists, members and non-members, was the fact that Delta Dental of Idaho is completely ignoring state statute on non-covered service laws. And they are bullying and forcing the dentist to ignore that law and to just sit down, shut up, and do what we say to do, because we know more. And if you don't, we're going to kick you off the panel. We're going to report you to the ISDA. We're going to report you to the Department of Occupational and Professional Licensing. For what? Telling you guys to obey the state law? This was incredible. And we have hardcore proof that took place.
There's other stuff that's going on in the background. So Idaho, just sit tight.
Yeah, and then that, and then it was also the ability to offer choice, which every insurance company allows to have happen, which is written right in the contracts with Delta of 16 states, but not Delta Dental of Idaho and Washington and Wyoming and Oklahoma and Hawaii. Okay, I just got to get it out there.
These other doctors also were a little bit concerned because their consulting dentist mentioned in the meeting that he didn't really practice all that much anymore. He was really committed majority of his time to Delta Dental. And the frustrating thing I think that they all had was, well, if you're working for Delta Dental and you're not understanding as a practitioner with your own business That's not the right mindset. But on top of it, he's not an Idaho dentist. He works out of state. And so
this is the dentist
they're consulting dentists.
They're consulting dentists.
And so if you've got somebody from out of state not feeling the pain of running a practice and being kind of manipulated by Delta Dental and seeing that low reimbursement, not knowing the state laws, really just pressuring and pushing and threatening these doctors who decide to call them out on it. That's where I get frustrated. Maybe they have the wrong person, who maybe they need somebody who's licensed, who knows the state law.
Licensed in the state of Idaho. Every state. There are laws that are out there that any reviewing dentist has to actually be licensed in the state where the review is taking place.
I think that's a genius law.
We're working on that here in Utah. And Idaho just needs to copy our downcoding and bundling protections law, and that's going to help them out a ton too. But let's be clear. Delta Dental up there didn't just move the cheese. They removed it entirely. They didn't move it. They removed it entirely when it comes to quality oral health care. And Delta's done that in all the states we've mentioned before. And they deny previously covered procedures and implemented policies that devalue the best practices in oral health care. And this undermines the clinical decision-making process, which one of the dentists actually brought out in that meeting, because dentists are concerned into choosing between what's right and what's reimbursable. And the result is a chilling effect on any kind of innovation or advanced care and ultimately the patient outcome. This isn't adaptation. It's actually erosion. It's erosion in the quality of deliverable care, which the Coyce Institute up in the Great Northwest presented that to the CEO and the COO of Delta Dental of Washington, and they stated, "Oh, we'll get back to you on that, because here's the Coyce Institute teaching their dentists how to deliver a very high quality of oral health care, but if you can't collect it from the patient." Because the insurance companies aren't going to pay on it. The insurance companies, in defense of them, again, their premiums are way too low to cover the highest standard of care that we can deliver to the patient. So then we're compromised in the care, or we're cost shifting, which is even, as I pointed out, more unethical. So it's like, when you learn how to do these things, like, what's the point in learning how to do them if you can't be paid for them? You know, that's kind of my 2 cents worth, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't think I am. But what an erosion. Holy cow. Quality matters. And not all dental materials and technology are equal. And when they're reviewing doctor, when it was said, well, we just want to be able to, that one lady said, I want to be able to charge for a cosmetic case and you won't allow me. I can't do a high-end cosmetic case if I can't charge the patient an additional fee. And now that I've heard that Delta Dental of 16 other states allow that, why won't you? And his comment was, well, the patient could be taken advantage of.
Well, and that was like, okay, so who is in charge of regulating the dentist if the patient has an issue?
Department of Occupational and Professional Licensing.
So, exactly.
And guess what else does?
Free market.
The free market system. If you charge as taught to me by the regional manager of Blue Cross Blue Shield back in 1991, Rob, if you charge too much for that better crown that's $200 versus a $75 one that I used to get, if you charge too much, you might lose the sale. If you charge too little, you've left money on the table. I said, Mary, how will I know? And they said, by how the patient answers the question. When you tell them the amount, they say, yeah, can we start now? You probably left money on the table.
Well, and this is what's frustrating to me. We had an experience back in like 3-4 months ago with a car company. We bought a car.
Oh my gosh.
The car was a lemon. It was a brand new lemon, but it was a lemon. So under this whole model, instead of filing the grievances that we did and really going through a third party because we were taken advantage of, The theory would be that we would move through our car insurance company and have our car insurance company maybe regulate the car dealer and tell the car dealer that they're taking advantage. That's not their job.
That would never happen.
That would never happen.
Nor should it happen in dentistry.
Exactly.
Right?
The insurance company should not be getting involved in these situations. And especially when there is oversight available through a third party, in this case, like you said, Doppel. Delta Dental and all insurance companies, their job is to have a plan benefit or not. And they have their policies and they pay accordingly or deny accordingly. But you cannot turn around and say that you're in charge of regulating the doctor when you think that they're doing something that shouldn't be done. That is not your job.
I find it interesting too that so many dentists out there, throughout the years, honey, a lot of dentists would say, well, yeah, but, this implant's good enough, or this filling or bonding agent's good enough. I can sleep at night using this one and it's good enough. But
then when their spouse comes into the office,
they won't use that on them.
They would never use it on that patient
or their children.
On that person. And so that's where it gets frustrating to me is going from really good to really great. And hey, really good is something you can sleep at night, but that is the least expensive professionally accepted treatment according to your clinical judgment.
Yeah. And my clinical judgment may be different than somebody else's, but I just have one simple question to ask. Why would CRA or the Forsyth Institute or anybody, why would they rate products from, poor to excellent if there wasn't a differential in products? And it's like, they don't all cost the same either. I'm sorry, people. We don't live in socialistic dentistry, but that's exactly what Delta Dental is trying to aim towards, I swear.
Well, and the whole concept of you get what you pay for, that's premiums. You pay low premiums, you get low reimbursement. You get low coverage.
You get what you pay for. What a concept. In that pursuit of healthcare excellence, oral healthcare excellence, quality is not a luxury.
No.
It's a necessity. But you have to pay for it. And the materials used in fillings and crowns and implants, and even in the anesthetics that we administer, they vary greatly in performance, in longevity, and in a biocompatibility, let's just say, too. Obviously, the same goes for diagnostic imaging equipment like CAD/CAM technology and procedural innovations like laser dentistry and guided implant surgery. One of our clients has a robot placing implants now. And of course, he's one of our clients, so he charges a patient an additional fee on top of the 6010 code. Did I say that right? Implant code 6010? I always have to check, right? He charges for that technology like he should. And in insurance policies that standardize or limit reimbursements, they fail to recognize that this variability. And obviously they did in that meeting on Friday, but they got called out and they started going, oh my gosh, they're actually calling out our reimbursement fees. And it's like, well, if you'll talk to us and tell us, well, we can maybe have some increases on those reimbursement fees. Did you hear what he said too?
Yeah.
Procedures that you do a lot of, we've increased by $3 to $5
versus the ones you don't do very much of, 10%.
It's like we're really trying to help you out, and that's a small percentage compared to when you offer choice. You can increase net profitability by 20 to 30%, easy. But when you're doing a crown or a filling, you're in the red, and nobody teaches you that, docs. That's why you have your hygiene department going at Mach 10. Because if you don't, your whole company's in the red. We see that. So it's I don't know. It's high quality, like high quality composites and ceramics cost more for a reason. They perform better. They do. They last longer. They're often less invasive, and sometimes some things we use are less toxic. And the assumption that all dental products or procedures are created equal, like the insurance companies want us to believe, that's dangerous and inaccurate. And the insurance companies, you've got to stand up to them and make change. This is exactly why dental and medical research institutions continue to publish these updated data information annually, and sometimes even more often, to define and refine what quality care looks like. And when we ignore that evidence in favor of cost-cutting policies, it's not only short-sighted, it's regressive, in my opinion. And I've been doing this for a long time. So I've seen that. I've seen nothing frothed me more than when Delta Dental Washington rep said, "Rob, you should order your crowns from China." That's what the DSOs are doing.
Oh, and she said a crown is a crown is a crown.
Yeah.
And that's where it's interesting. And we do, again, have to look at the business model with these insurance companies. They're competing against each other in really a pure competition mindset, which is they have a standardized product. They all cover pretty much the same stuff, and they don't cover the same stuff. They downgrade on posteriors. All these things are very, very similar when it comes to these policies. And so how can they compete? They compete with lowering their price. Now, we don't have that mentality in dentistry. A crown is not a crown, but that's what they think. And so we have this variable in differentials in costs of goods. We're living in a different type of competition. And unfortunately, I'm going to say amongst ourselves with dentistry, that we can't change the pricing. We're really PPO driven across the nation. So we're held to a certain fee for LEPAT services, but we can compete against each other and actually make a profit and get more customers, more patients by offering quality and differentials in cost of goods, which is exactly what we should be doing.
Well, it's the maze has changed, but so should we.
Yes.
And here's the thing that is so irritating. Delta Dental of Washington started this how many years ago?
2020, 2021, roughly.
And
about 4 years
went
ago.
after a couple of our clients up there for offering choice, but yet Article 2, Section 11, am I right on that?
That's correct.
Literally stated that offering choice you could offer choice, and even in Washington state law, insurance companies cannot come between the doctor-patient relationship, and nobody on the Washington State Dental Association wanted to challenge Delta Dental of Washington on it. Nobody wanted to stick up for our clients up there, but now we're starting to see this change take place in Washington, and if Idaho wins, that's a win. If Idaho pushes back on Delta and has them adopt the Delta Dental of 16 states verbiage, that's what we hope for, because that is what allows dentists to not decrease the quality of oral healthcare delivery. And that Delta Dental's their decisions represent that seismic shift in the dental landscape that started back in 2020, 2021, and then we saw it. Then it moves to Idaho, and now it's moving to Wyoming. And when they make policy changes to their own contract. Mm-hmm. In fact, in the Idaho State Dental Association meeting with Delta, one of the docs stood up and read right out of their contract
about LEPAT services.
About LEPAT, and he said, "I'm reading right here. It states that I can offer choice." Didn't he read that very clearly?
If I remember rightly, he did. And here's the thing.
They sat there and didn't say a word, did they?
Well, it makes you wonder if they know their own contracts.
Oh.
I'm just saying.
Well, obviously they don't.
They didn't.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the whole thing. Apparently, my whole thing is that if the Idaho dentists and the associations step back now that they know the truth, they know the law, they know Delta's mentality. And let's say Delta stands their ground and nothing happens. They decide that they are going to continue to prohibit writing off or decreasing the number in non-covered services. They push for bundling more. They tell doctors they have to absorb the cost if they do MAPAT services. They're falling in line right behind Washington State. And this is where the association and the dentists, that you have the information now. If you cannot move forward and push back and continue pushing back, you will be the new Washington State.
And Wyoming will be right behind them.
Mm-hmm.
By removing the cheese of quality oral health care, especially in targeted states, and these states are being targeted.
Yes.
They're not asking providers to adapt. No, they're asking them to comply comply. Mm-hmm. You shut up, sit down, or we will kick you off of our network, bullying system, comply with a downgraded standard that contradicts science, contradicts ethics, contradicts professional judgment. By the way, those wonderful dentists in the state of Idaho in that meeting pointed out all three of those. And
they did.
Good for them, and stand up for that in a way that was spoken from the heart and spoken to Delta Dental of Idaho that, look, we can't continue to practice like this. Dentists have to advocate collectively and loudly and respectfully for a system that values clinical integrity over cost containment. That's what it really is, don't you think, hon?
100%.
And patients, they got to be informed that the quality of their care is increasingly dictated not by the provider, but by the insurance algorithm. And the amazing, that maze is changing, but it's time to challenge who's designing it and who's moving or removing the cheese entirely. So Idaho State dentists actually are in a position to really control their destiny. And I hope they work with their association leader, their executive director, and the leadership. And I hope they continue to push for legislation like we have down here in Utah to have insurance reform and to do what's right for the patient, and to not allow a third-party payer to control the quality of deliverable oral health care to those patients and not force a dentist to go bankrupt.
See, and I'm thinking about your maze analogy, and right now, I think the mentality in Idaho and many other states is, okay, Delta has this maze. I either go in the maze or I don't go in the maze at all. And what we're suggesting is, let's change that maze up a little bit. Allow them to be on that Delta Dental in that maze with some secret doors here and there, so where you can be profitable while still working with the insurance companies.
Yeah.
And at the same time, if this is something where Delta is saying it is what it is, take it or leave it, there's a fear. And I do want to address that before we finish up. There's a fear that if you leave the network, that patients will leave too. Not if you do it the right way.
Not if they understand the reason for the leaving.
When patients understand that you are getting out of network because you're being forced to limit the quality of care that you can deliver, you have several other options for the patient, and you make it very clear with explaining to the patient, I have these better things I can't even offer you. Now you're changing the mentality of the patients, and a lot of these patients also have out-of-network benefits. They're not going to leave if you have the right narrative and you're explaining things to the patients in a way that they understand. So don't be afraid to stand your ground. But when you comply, this is where problems are going to happen. Push back.
If we can, it would be nice to be able to work with Delta Dental of Idaho, and that's the ideal outcome. But if they're not willing to allow choice to patients and docs, if you are giving them the highest level of choice and they're not paying for it,
you're playing into their game.
You're playing in their game. Shame on both of you. Mm-hmm. I mean, really, because that's like no business would ever do that. And you got to knock that stuff off. And
as Delta Dental said, they only exist because the dentists are there.
That was such a... that was so powerful, and hopefully they'll win the battle. We're hoping and praying for all of you up there in Idaho, and many states are very similar, but all of us that live in the Delta Dental of 16 states and all the other insurance plans, understanding contracts and state laws, we're very profitable with these insurance plans. You just have to understand the business behind it, and of course, that's what we train on. And that's what makes our training extremely beneficial and profitable to the practices we serve. Any closing thoughts? Docs in Idaho, keep fighting for that cheese. Till next time, thanks so much for listening. We hope you have a great day. Thank you for being with us today. Since 2006, My Practice, My Business has been teaching dentists and their teams business skills, dental insurance contractual protocols, and state laws governing how to profitably bill patients fairly for the need-based services they provide. What's more, we guarantee our training
unlike other dental consulting companies in the industry. Simply stated, if you don't increase your net revenue, we don't get paid. We call it dental consulting the way it should be. We believe there has never been a more important time than now for dentists to experience and implement our key methods, knowledge, and business training within their dental practices. To learn more about our guaranteed, no-risk clinical business of dentistry training that is changing dental practices for the better, just go to our website, mypracticemybusiness.com, and surf our pages for additional information about our company and the services we provide. When you're ready, give us a call and get scheduled for the most profitable dental business training that you will ever experience. If you enjoyed our podcast, please leave us a 5-star review. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to call us. Thank you again and have a fantastic day.